morning, good evening, good day, good night, wherever you're dialing in and watching the video. I appreciate you dialing in for another one of our videos. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the comment below the video or hit us over on the Facebook page or go to webbaptist.com and leave us a comment over there. Today we're looking at a group of people called the Edomites. Now, the Edomites come from a specific person, the descendants of Esau, and the firstborn of Isaac and twin brother of Jacob. And they have a place in history, but they also have a place in destiny and unfortunately in God's revelation and prophecy as well. And we're going to look at that here in a second. So when you look at the descendants, the kingdom of Edom and the Edomites, they were around from like 13th century BC to 553, 554 BC, where they were conquered by the Chaldeans and the Babylonian Empire. And we'll get more in that in just a minute. Their location is, for the most part, in the Transjordan region. And if you were to look at a map, I'm going to try to have a little picture next to me for that. It's going to be between Moab in the northeast and Judah to the northwest, Araba to the west, and the Arabian Desert to the south and east. So it's right there on that southern area. It's a little kingdom that was kind of carved out there at the bottom of the map of the area that we've been studying in the Bible in regards to the book of Genesis and the characters within that region. So when we look at the Bible, I mean, first thing we do when we look at the Edomites, we have to see where their origins come from, the Bible for the most part, and we start there and we look and see how all that started. So the Edomites were descendants of Esau. We've already established that. And Esau is the firstborn of Isaac and Rebekah, and a twin brother to Jacob. So in the womb, Esau and Jacob struggled together. And God told their mother, Rebekah, that they would become two nations, with the older one serving the younger one. And that's in Genesis 25:23. So we know from the get-go that Jacob would become the nation, would become Israel and become the nation of Israel with the 12 tribes. And Esau would be less than. Basically what God was saying is, my promise to Abraham will be fulfilled through Jacob and not Esau, which is kind of different in that area of the world, simply because the firstborn is very important. The firstborn had all the rights. The firstborn controlled everything and inherited everything. But in this case, Esau was very careless with his birthright, selling it to Jacob for a bowl of stew. And therefore, with his carelessness, he gave up and he lost and he forfeited his birthright through his actions and his proof that he didn't care about anything but himself. He didn't care about God or Abraham or Isaac or any of the things that they probably knew about and grew up with under the tutelage and instruction of Isaac. So as an adult, he just didn't care. So now Esau would become the father of the Edomites, and Jacob became the father of the Israelites. And the two nations continued to struggle throughout their history. So we know right off the bat that there's a lot of contention between the two brothers when we read one. Like I said earlier, the birthright was given to Jacob for a bowl of stew. And then, of course, when we read about the blessing that was given to Jacob, as him and Rebekah planned for Jacob to get that blessing under the disguise of being Esau to his near blind or blind father Isaac. So when that blessing was given to given to Jacob instead of Esau, well, obviously Esau was very mad, and Rebekah made sure that Jacob fled the household fled, the settlement fled the place that they were at in order to preserve his life, because I'm sure Esau at this time was probably going to kill him. Not only did he have his birthright, which Esau frivolously gave up, now he's got the blessing from his father, and that blessing could not just be retracted. He was already blessed and given, and Isaac couldn't do anything about it. Well, on top of that, Esau proved himself to be a problem because he was not marrying within the family of Isaac and Abraham, and he was marrying outside. He was marrying foreign women, and he just wasn't listening. He wasn't listening to prophecy. He wasn't listening. He had a way of doing things for himself, and that's it. In my opinion, he had the same approach to life as Cain did. Even though Cain would become a murderer, even after he murdered, he had no remorse and no concern for anyone else but himself. And he also has the characteristics of King Saul. King Saul was he didn't really care about how God wanted things to be done through his prophet Samuel. He was going to do things on his own and not worry about the consequences. And that's the same thing with Esau, in my opinion. So now in the Bible, we see that there are references to kingdoms, land, and capital. We see that in Joshua. We see it in Isaiah. And we see it in Second Kings. Selah is better known today as Petra. So there's plenty of pictures on the internet for Petra, the carvings in the rocks and those kind of things that people are really interested in seeing, and they're very peculiar pieces of history. Now, Genesis 36 recounts the early history of the Edomites, stating that they had kings reigning over them before Israel had a king. So that's pretty interesting. We see that in 36:31. The religion of the Edomites, for the most part, was similar to that of other pagan societies at that time. Their gods centered around nature. They centered around the stars in the sky, the constellations, and that kind of stuff. Fertility gods and of the sort. So there was nothing really. That's the only, in this region of the world at this time, the only different nation, if you want to say different, would be the Israelites, would be those people that came from the seed of Jacob. So, and they were told and they were brought up and they were God's people and God's people alone. They didn't have multiple gods and a pantheon of beliefs. And so that's very important. So Esau's descendants eventually dominated the southern lands and made their living in agriculture and trade. So if you look at the map where we showed the kingdom of Edom, in that area, they controlled the trade routes. So they can dictate passage. They can dictate the control there. You know, people passing through their towns, levy taxes and those kind of things. They knew about agriculture. They knew about hunting. They knew a lot of different things. So one of the ancient trade routes, the King's Highway, we see that in Numbers 20:17, passed through Edom. And so, and then, you know, when the Israelites requested permission to use that route in their exodus from Egypt, Edom said no, forcefully said, no, you cannot. So again, we see that struggle between the two, even from the very beginning. What started with Esau and Jacob would continue through history, and as God foretold and God promised. But, however, because they were close relatives, the Israelites were forbidden to hate the Edomites. And we see that in Deuteronomy 23:7. So regardless of what was going on, God did not want them to be mad at the Edomites. They didn't want them to conquer them. God wanted them to leave them alone. They are who they are. And so if God is telling them not forbidden to hate them, well, if you don't hate them, you can't go to war with them. You can't fight them and everything along that line of reasoning. So now, but on the flip side of that, the Edomites regularly attacked Israel. They just did. And the many wars that were fought as a result, King Saul fought against the Edomites, and King David even subjugated them, establishing a military garrison within Edom. With the control over the Edomite territory, Israel had access to the port of Ezra and Geber on the Red Sea. So if you look at a map, that control extended all the way down. They had that small sliver, small little entrance into the Red Sea. So which King Solomon, sent out many expeditions. He just did at that time. So after the reign of Solomon, the Edomites revolted and some of the freedom until they were subdued by the Assyrians. So at the great height of Solomon, David, and then his son Solomon, the Edomites were subjugated and they were under that control. But it wasn't so much they were under control, and that's part of the prophecy that God was saying, was that the younger would be greater than the older in that regard. So, and it didn't just extend there; it would extend, as we see later on, past this time in the Old Testament. So we look at we continue on after the fall of Edom. We're looking at the nation flourished until it was destroyed. After a period of decline, as with all these nations at this time, and in this region of the world, these nations were pretty much small. I mean, they had wealth and they had control and they had armies. But at the same time, the armies that were being developed in Assyria, Babylon, the Greek, and the Romans that would be coming in, those armies, outside forces, for the most part, would be used by God to bring judgment to these nations of Israel, as well as those nations around Israel. So we see that before the Babylonians would come in and conquer and wipe out ancient Israel and wipe out. They didn't just take over and subjugate Israel. They went in and they took all the other lands around there too. They just didn't stop with one nation. So Edom fell as well. So when the Babylonians took that, after the fall of Edom during this time of subjugation by the Babylon Empire, the Edomites were pushed westward even more, because you got to think now, as conquered territory continues, a lot of people are being displaced due to army, war, famine, and all those things that are happening, right? So these people that lived over there in these areas being conquered, they're pushing further and further west. Well, those people that are living in those places are having to be themselves pushed further and further west. So this is what was going on. You had kind of a small migration of these conquered territories. And so, the Edomites were pushed westward. Southern Judah by the nomadic tribes coming in from the east. They just were. So the Nabateans would be the tribe that would come in, and they would take over the place that was Edom at that time. So Nabatean Empire would set up and what used to be Edom. So in the first half of the 3rd century. So there we see that the original people of what was Edom will be driven out. And so those that would stay would be sucked into the Nabatean culture and the Nabatean people. This nomadic tribe would come in, and all of a sudden they're taking control. And Edom couldn't do anything about that, because they, for the most part, lost and were subjugated under the Babylonian armies. And so when those armies withdrew, they took a lot of slaves and a lot of the riches and the wealth with them. And what was left was kind of a skeleton frame of a past glory. And so what was left was the leftovers of the population. And so you have this other tribe coming in from the east, the Nabateans moving in, and they got more power, more wealth, more soldiers. They lost their land, so they would push, and they would have to move into the spot in southern Judah. So that's just what happened. So once they settled in their new territory, it was called Idumea during the Hellenistic and the Roman period. So again, whenever the Babylonian captivity was over and the Jews were coming back, it wasn't the same country that they left. not only was it divided, but it was further divided. And so Idumea would turn out to be a region that the Edomites would move into and claim as their own. So that's what we're seeing during the conquering of the Greek and eventually the Romans. And so the Greek and the Romans see these people living there, and so they make them a province. And they call them, look at what we got. We got Judea. We got Idumea. So we're starting to see the evolution of these areas based on outside forces drawing lines on a map for the most part. Now, during the Testament period between the Old Testament and the New Testament, you have a 400-year period where I don't want to say silent because God was still moving. I personally look at the time between the New Testament and the Old Testament as God, kind of setting the stage. He's going from Act 1 to Act 2, and the curtain's drawn, and then that 400 years, there's pieces moving around and setting the stage for the eventual come of Jesus. So, and during this time, in this inter-testament period, the Maccabean revolt happened. And during the Maccabean revolt, you have people rising up against their oppressed Greek masters. They're fighting back, and they're trying to establish their own identity because they come back from captivity and they're setting up their own country, but they're not allowed to have a king. So what they have to do is their priests have become their authority. The priesthood would become their authority and their control, and that's why we get the Sadducees and the Pharisees in that regard. However, with that uprising, we have some control in their region that threatens the stability of this region. So, but during this time, the Edomites were either forcibly converted or they were converted to Judaism by the Hasmonean dynasty at that time under the Maccabean revolt. So this Hasmonean dynasty were incorporating them into the Jewish population. So again, was it forceful? Many biblical scholars believe it was forceful. But there are some who say it was a willing absorption for protection against the tribes from the south and from the neighbors on each side, other sides beating down their door. So, the Greeks are looking at the fact, okay, we got this territory, you're still separate provinces, even though that you're in this area. So long as there's stability that was given to them, then all that would be okay. So now we look at in the rise of the Roman Empire, we got one Idumean who is, for the most part, popular. And that would be, his father converted to Judaism and named King of Judah. So, and Herod the Great is who we're talking about here. And the problems with his sons to follow. So we kind of see where the results of the Idumea kind of absorbed into the Judea province and the people through the Maccabean revolt. Well, out of that comes King Herod the Great. So now, after Herod's death, the Idumea people slowly disappears from history, and I think a lot of that is a sense of identity. We don't see a lot of the names, we don't see a lot of the control, and we don't really see their place in history. Because they were absorbed into the Jewish population, and when that happened, they just kind of disappear. They become immersed into the Jewish population. So God had foretold the destruction of the Edomites when we look at Ezekiel 35, and it says, "As you rejoice over the inheritance of the house of Israel, because it was desolate, so I will deal with you. You shall be desolate, Mount Seir, and all of Edom, all of it. When they know, then they will know that I'm the Lord." That's Ezekiel 35, 15. So, despite Edom's constant efforts to rule the Jews and conquer and control and harass, God's prophecy to Rebekah was fulfilled that the older child served the younger. And Israel proved to be stronger than Edom. I mean, that's just what happened. Again, they disappear over the course of history due to their own actions and the actions of the Jewish people, Israel. And God foretold this. So there you have it. And that's what you have with the Edomites. Now, if you're looking for anything for a quick read or a little bit more than the video, I would suggest you pick up The Edomites by Mary L.T. Witter. It's a very short, concise piece. It is a little bit dated. It's like 120 pages, and she wrote this in the 1888 when it was published. And so you kind of get an idea of the dating of the writing when you read it. It's got a little bit of flowery to it, but it's very immersed and very well written, given God's word, is where she relies heavily on the history of that. I'm going to read one part of this. It was holy mountainous, and we're talking about the land of Edom here. She's talking about it was holy mountainous, and it was situated on the south of Moab. Generally supposed to have been but 100 miles long by 20 miles wide. Bozrah and its ancient capital, and was, it may be presumed, the birthplace of Jobab, one of Edom's kings. With the name of the city, all Bible readers are familiar with the fact that it was met with very remarkable portion of Scripture, the 63rd chapter of the prophecy of Isaiah, in which a victory over the Edomites is typically of the triumph of the Lord Jesus Christ over all enemies. Interesting. So we see it's a little stuff like that. Again, I wanted to give you a small example. When you read this book, she relies heavily on the prophecies that are written in the Bible in regards to trying to describe the Edomites. Okay, so that's pretty much all we know. They existed. They were kind of a pain in the Israel side for a while, but eventually they were absorbed by the nation of Israel and disappeared altogether. Okay, all right. Thank you for watching. I appreciate your time as always. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the video below. I'll be glad to get to you at my earliest convenience. If you want to, you can hit us up over on the Facebook page, leave a comment over there, or go to our website at webbaptist.com, and we'll be glad to get back to you at the earliest convenience. If you're welcome to come and join and worship with us here at Webb Baptist on Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights. We'd love to have you here. If you cannot make it to Webb Baptist, please get plugged into a church wherever you are and find out what God's plan is for you. I guarantee you're going to be a blessing to that church just as much as that church family is going to be a blessing to you. Okay? Until next time, take care. God bless.